Well, hello, slingers. Welcome back to another Wordslinger podcast. And this time I'm talking to a new friend, Taylor Moore. He's an author living right here in Texas. You're going to want to stick around for this, so see you soon.
It's the Wordslinger podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Well, I am Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger, and I'm happy to have you here. My guest today is somebody, I actually met him for the first time when I interviewed him for a recent episode of the Writers Inc. podcast. Now, here's a little secret, sort of behind the scenes kind of thing when it comes to podcasting. So the Writers Inc. podcast, I do that with JD Barker, Christine Daigle, and Jenna Brown. And the four of us, we get together every Thursday and we record an episode. And the interviews that are in those episodes have actually been pre-recorded, sometimes months in advance. So I actually first talked to Taylor a couple of months ago, 2-3 months ago, but his episode went live, I think about 2 weeks ago at this point. But he and I really hit it off, and one of the reasons we hit it off is because we're both Texas authors. We both grew up in roughly the same area. He was Central Texas, I was more Gulf Coast, but now he lives in the Panhandle and I live in Central Texas. So we just sort of shifted our way up. But one of the things I really liked about Taylor was he's very, first of all, he's an ex-CIA agent, which is intriguing all on its own, and some of his work stories are very entertaining, but he's a very genuine guy, and I just enjoyed connecting with him, and I hope that we actually kind of continue that relationship going forward. I think we will. Really good time, really good interview. So I won't keep you from it. Let's dive into that, but stick around after, and I'll have a few words following the interview, and I hope you enjoy this chat of mine with Taylor Moore. Well, I'm actually glad to be sitting here with this one. I've already interviewed Taylor Moore. If you listen to the Writers Inc. podcast, which you should, you need to slip over, catch the interview with Taylor Moore. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago. I tagged you on Twitter. I don't know if you saw that. So
I don't do a lot of Twitter. I do other things. Twitter is like my neglected child. It's like the middle kid that doesn't get any love from me. And I know everybody loves Twitter. I just don't like Twitter. I don't know why.
Some people don't like it. I get it.
Yeah.
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 Go ahead.
I don't know why. No, yeah. I was going to say, I don't really even know why. I know some people love it. I just, whatever the mechanism is that my brain doesn't work that way. I like Instagram. It's probably my favorite, but I need to be more active.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I can't click with Instagram or TikTok or,
I haven't done TikTok yet. Yeah, I've managed to. It's one of those kicking and screaming things that I guess I should probably do, but I just don't want to. So
no, you have to focus on the thing that, like, this is what you don't need this kind of coaching. You're already. You're doing great. Oh, by the way, everybody, we're talking to Taylor Moore. If I didn't introduce him, I don't think I did, actually.
Oh, okay. Sorry. We just immediately launched in.
We just jumped in. That's what that happens. I introduced you before this the recorded stuff even started. So no problem. But I tell incoming authors all the time, like, everyone freaks out about, like, what, I don't want to do TikTok or I don't want to do Twitter, and just focus on the one that, you're comfortable with, that you're willing to spend time on. You don't have to do all of them. So don't crush yourself over it, man.
Okay, good. I won't then.
So I have a story to tell you actually about your books, because I had ordered your latest one, but I hadn't read all the 3 previous books in that series. So I went on Amazon just before your interview came out live, and before I went traveling I went to Novelist Inc. in St. Pete Beach, Florida last week or a couple weeks ago. So before I went, I was going to get your books, get them here. I could read at least one of them on that trip. So I get a notification This is like the day before we're flying out. I pushed it as hard as I could to get it before we left. I get this notification that says, Amazon delivered your package. Let us know how we did. And it's got that picture. And that picture was someone else's door.
Oh no.
So I tried reporting it. They make it kind of hard to report it.
Yeah.
And while I'm doing all that, my Ring camera goes off, and one of my neighbors shows up, and he took he actually opened the box and took the book out, and he put it on a little table outside our front door.
Okay.
So I knew it was there. I think I was away at the moment, but when I got to it, I got it, and the cover was torn. So all
Oh.
that. So I had to
Oh.
replace it, but we were going out of town next
Yeah.
day. So yeah. So that's it. So I got all four of these books should be showing up anytime now, but I'm waiting on them. So,
Well, good. Well, I appreciate you getting the books,
oh, of course, man.
I'm sorry, but the story turned out better than I thought. I thought you were going to say Amazon said they hadn't got any shipments from HarperCollins or something
Well, then
horrible.
I'm
Because
waiting. We haven't gotten that one yet. Well, let's wait and see how
okay,
that one turns out. But yeah,
good.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm really
Uh,
interested in, because you and I talk when we talked on Writers Inc. So the thing that people need to know, this is the question. What the first question I asked the panel once we played your interview was, uh, what state produces the best writers and why is it Texas? So
so that's the question. Oh, I mean,
that was the
I don't
question. Yeah,
know. Everything's bigger and better in tech. I don't know.
that's what it is, though. I mean,
Yeah.
you're in the Panhandle.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Or
But
yeah.
you're from my general area, right? You said you were
Yeah.
Central Texas. I didn't know
Yeah.
exactly where.
I'm from Central Texas, but moved up here about 11 years ago. And I tell you, I got into a critique group up here before I thought about doing this professionally. And
Yeah.
I was with two New York Times bestselling romance writers here in Amarillo. So yeah, there's a lot of great writers. They're just spread out across the place. It's a big place with a lot of little enclaves of writers to hide out, I guess.
That's the thing. Yeah. And really, that's sort of true everywhere. I think I told you last time we talked, my wife and I, we were full-time van lifers for 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so you find these pockets of writers just about everywhere you go. But
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, Texas, I don't know why, but I live in Austin. Might as well be Austin. I live just north of Austin, and there's a ton of writers here. Like this has become just this magnet for
Yeah.
especially self-published writers. But there's a lot of writers here. But
Well, I have two good friends. Philip Meyer there. He's a Pulitzer Prize finalist for The Sun. Amazing and talented guy. A friend of mine is there in Austin, and Don Bentley, of course, doing the Vince Flynn stuff. That's more
yeah,
in my genre, but that's two right there that I can think of. But there's a lot more that are staked out there for sure.
yeah, yeah. It's entertaining, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I could survive up where you are, man. I mean, I've spent time, but that's rugged country up there.
Yeah, the between the solitude and the blizzards and the wildfires and
Yeah,
all the things that are in my book series, all the natural elements come into play throughout my books, but they're real. And in fact, everybody knows about we're kind of tornado alley, fine.
yeah.
Wildfires, okay, fine. Blizzards, fine. One year, it was like 3 or 4 years ago, we got what was called a land hurricane. Have you ever even heard of that? A
No, I
land
hadn't.
hurricane.
That's
I
crazy.
mean,
Yeah.
I never, but yeah, that was gale force winds
Yeah.
across the land that came and were ripping roofs off and knocking over, telephone poles and everything. And
Yeah.
yeah, so we got a land hurricane. We invent
Yeah. Yeah. We
meteorological
just
problems up
new
here.
meteorological. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that wasn't that long ago, right? That was like 2 or 3 years ago. Because
yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, I'd
yeah,
say.
my
Yeah,
wife and I moved here. Here's the big thing. My wife
yeah.
is like, I'm tired of hurricanes, so we're
Okay.
gonna move to Austin so that we're off the Gulf Coast. And I'm like, great. We're just exchanging hurricanes for like, tornadoes and rattlesnakes
Hmm.
and scorpions, but yeah,
Yeah,
but at least there's no hurricanes. But then
yeah.
like we get in the area, as soon as we're in the area, suddenly the first thing that happened to us was a Arctic blast where
Yeah, right.
Everything froze.
Yeah,
And then I don't know if it was before or after that, but there was the land hurricane of all
yeah.
things, man. So
I know. I know. We have it all. Like, wherever you go, we've determined there's always something bad. I mean, California has the most beautiful weather, but the
yeah,
earthquakes, right? And they're still waiting for the big one. And but every now and then they get one that really wreaks havoc on the place.
yeah, yeah. Well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, what are you gonna
We
do?
cannot yet control the weather, but
No.
uh, you are an interesting fact about you. You're ex-CIA, which is
Hmm.
enviable actually as a thriller writer. But there was a question
Yeah.
I did not ask you on Writers Inc. that I should ask you
Okay.
now, which is because everyone I talk to who's ever been sort of at that level of service in law enforcement or government or military, like they're required to pass their books through uh,
Mhm.
a reviewer before
Oh
they can
yeah.
even publish. Is that something you got to do?
Absolutely. CIA is I think it's the Pre-Publication Review Board, PRB. Am I getting that
Yeah,
right? It's PCRB. So there's another, the acronym grew somehow. I don't remember what that's for, but anyhow,
government.
but no, I know government, right? No, everything I do, whether I'm a screenwriter too, I always send it through the review board. And I send all my drafts, my manuscripts through the review board. It's one of those things, people have asked me, is that a pain? Is it, it's never been bad. I mean, to the credit of the people that do this, they're always pretty quick. I think within 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month at the longest. But no, they've always been pretty good about it. I never mind doing it because I don't want to reveal anything, because people are like, oh,
Yeah,
you're writing about the CIA stuff. Like, aren't you worried you're gonna? I'm like, not really, because I try. First of all, I try not to. But even if I did, there's this sort of secondary, set of eyes that are on it. And then my understanding is that if you mention other acronyms, they send that out for review too. So if it's DEA or FBI, they send that out to be reviewed by them. That's my understanding. There's no real communication back and forth with it's almost as secretive a process as the CIA. There's no you get I think look it looks like an auto generated name back as to who you're dealing with, and
yeah,
it's just an email and an email back like it either was reviewed or passed review or it didn't. And I've had things redacted before. So there are times that I did overstep. It was over things that I was pretty shocked. I thought that was like common knowledge. Um, but I guess it
yeah.
wasn't. So
That'd
I
be
just take it out.
interesting.
That's no big
Yeah,
deal. Yeah.
I don't have to deal with that for my books, and I am very liberal about listing out all the alphabet agencies, and
Hmm.
I use them left and right. But I
Yeah.
I wonder if I could pass. Like I don't know things
Yeah.
officially,
Yeah.
but I have heard occasionally of people didn't intend to share some secret, but they made something up, but it was a little too close to
Well,
fact or something.
I've been told I've done that too. In the book Ricochet, the third book, I write all about Pantex, which is a nuclear weapons facility just outside of town here in Amarillo. And
Yeah,
because it's there, obviously a lot of like wild stuff goes on, behind the scenes that nobody knows about. I've never worked at Pantex. I don't know anything about it. Beyond, some people that work there, but people have kind of laughed and said, "Man, you stumbled on some things you probably didn't even know,"
yeah,
And so it's funny, I mean, yeah. So if you, especially if you work in government, you kind of know how things go, and
right.
so just put your
Yeah.
imagination together with everything else you've ever read, and yeah, you can probably get pretty close.
Yeah, believe it or not, I have that happen. So, like, I write mostly archaeological thrillers. So,
Yeah.
I think what happens is because you read a lot, watch a lot, you're exposed to a lot of this information.
Hmm.
There's certain intuitive leaps you can make, even if even if you don't know something. Like, and I've had people write me and say, I didn't know anything about this, the Temple of Apush or something,
Yeah.
something. And but I looked it up and it's amazing. Thanks for turning me on to that. I'm like, I literally made that up. I had no idea that was real.
Well, I did that the other day. I made up a whole. Well, so I'm writing a new book now, and I'm writing a standalone, unrelated to the Garrett Cole series, and I just created a building. I created an organization, and I was just Googling around doing research the other day, and there is one.
Yeah.
That's the good thing, bad thing about Google. I feel like everything's at your fingertips for better or worse, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I thought, oh, here's a great title to this book. And you're like, oh, there's 50 more just like it. Or, this here's a great characters for my protagonist, and somebody else has already done it. So that's the downside of it, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Takes a little bit of the mystery out, but then also it adds enriching detail to what you're
It does.
writing.
It
So
does. Yeah.
you uh what's your I don't want to turn this into like a full like I told you before we even started, like I try to do something a little different with these, but you and I share certain characteristics in common. So and
Yeah.
writing's one of those. So
Yeah.
I kind of keep looping back to that. But
No.
you told me a story, and I'm going to make you retell it about
Okay.
meeting JD Barker.
Yeah.
I met JD in Tennessee. He was at a writers conference during the pandemic. Uh, we, he was the key speaker at this thing. It
Hmm.
was the guys he used to do the Writers Inc. podcast with. But
Okay.
I met it when I saw him talk. I immediately thought, oh, that's. I was in this stage where I was trying. I told him this too. I was trying to upgrade my five. The whole Jim Rohn, or is it Jim Rohn who said that you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with? I think it was Jim
Oh,
Rohn.
okay. Yeah. I haven't heard
So,
that one, but
I
yeah.
was trying to kind of upgrade my five.
Yeah.
So I went to
Yeah.
him afterwards and I said all that. I'm like, hey man,
Okay.
I've got this thing, Jim Rohn, and
Yeah.
he kind of nods along. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. That's great. And
Yeah.
then I never heard from him again
Right.
until about maybe a little over 2 years ago. Like one of the hosts that he was co-hosting Writers Inc. with reached out and said, "Hey, we have an opening on the podcast. Come along." So that's where JD and I can really connected was once I joined the
Yeah.
podcast. Your story's better though.
Well, so I'll tell you, I met JD I can't even remember how many years ago. It was probably 2 years, but I have four books out and now I'm going on a fifth. Yeah, so this might have been like 2017 or something like that. I went to my first Thriller Fest and I mean, I had nothing at this point. I was just a boy with a dream. And
Yeah,
I think he must have been teaching. It was at Craft Fest actually, because I bet he was teaching. And I just happened to sit down by him. And, he's kind of a memorable looking guy. He has the long hair. He looks like a
yeah,
character out of his books or something. And so I sit by this guy and somebody else introduces themselves, and he's like, "I'm JD Barker," and I was like, that it didn't mean anything at the time. And I went back to my hotel room, and I noticed this in this little gimme bag. They had a book by JD Barker. I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And they described it. I think they called it like "Silence of the Lambs" meets Seven or something. And I was
yeah.
like, that's not what I read. This is not interesting to me. Well, I sat down. I started reading one page, then the next. Then I'm just chapter. I think I read that whole book on the way home. Then I got the other books that were in the series, or maybe there was only one coming out. But whatever it was, I read them all. I read Dracul. I became a huge J.D. Barker fan. So I was so mad. I had this opportunity to meet this writer hero, and I didn't
Yeah.
get to do it. And so fortunately, I saw him that next year at Thriller Fest, and he was and I told him the story that I'm just telling now. Like, man, I was so disappointed I didn't get to meet you, but we hung out, I bet, an hour and a half at least. He took time, talked to me, gave me advice. It was just the coolest, nicest, most humble, down to earth guy.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that again, at that point, I think I had an agent. I was working on a book, but he was the kind of guy I wanted to be in terms of like approachability for people. Not that I'm anybody, but at that time, I thought, well, if I ever do get published and I ever have some success, I want to be a guy like JD Barker that is so kind and humble and nice to people that
Right.
approach him, because I kind of geeked out, if I'm being honest, like I want to kind of get a picture and all that. And I think that's part of the thing is geeking out to your writer heroes is what it's fun, but at the same
Yeah.
time to have someone that doesn't treat you like an underling or something was so nice. I always appreciated JD for that. And after when I was a debut author, I ended up sending him an email. I asked someone within the organization. I was like, do you have his email address? Because I'd love to like just thank him, for what he had done. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
He's
great
very
guy.
he's very approachable.
Yeah,
Uh and a very nice guy. Yeah. I'm kind of honored to have him in my circles at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he feels the same way
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah,
Uh,
he probably looks at me and goes, "Who's that guy?" I was like, "Oh, I can remember that guy who, like, trailed me around Thriller Fest for
no,
a
he's
day
pretty
or
good
two.
about like he
Yeah.
knows everybody. So, he
Yeah.
kind of keeps, I think he has like a Rolodex in his head, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah. So have you met other writers that you consider to be kind of, heroes to you in the work? I mean, who's the biggest you've met?
Well, yeah, so interestingly enough, just and it's been in the news, Nelson DeMille, who recently
Yeah.
passed
Oh,
away.
yeah. That
So
was
I gotta. Oh, I'm
heartbreaking.
sorry, but yeah, it was heartbreaking. But I'll tell you this story too. I was doing an interview with Barbara Peters, Poison Pen, and
Hmm.
she asked me. The question came up. She said, "Well, who's the guy, or what's the book?" I can't remember how she phrased it. That got you into thriller writing, and I said, hands down, The Charm School by Nelson DeMille. I said that
Yeah.
was the book, and I always just, and I've said this in lots of interviews. I said that's the high I'll always be chasing as a reader. And I said,
Hmm.
that's what I'll always be chasing as a writer, to deliver what he delivered in that book. And so Barbara, she was like, well, he's coming out here. Why don't you come out and interview him? And so I got the invitation, went out to Scottsdale and got to hang out with Nelson. We went out to dinner. And if you've ever seen an interview of him,
Yeah.
as charming and warm and funny and as you see him in the interviews, that's exactly how he is as a human being and in person, and just couldn't have been kinder or nicer. So that they always say never meet your heroes, but sometimes you can meet them and it turns out great. And he was an example of
Sometimes.
when it turned out
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I've met heroes that did that I was super disappointed,
Yeah.
and I think everybody needs a disappointing hero story.
Yeah.
But it's cool when you get the good ones too.
I wish I had a lot fewer than I have.
Hmm.
I've been pretty privileged to meet a lot of the people that influenced me as a writer,
Yeah.
coming up. And
But even
sometimes,
guys, well, I mean, but most people, I've found to be pretty good, pretty nice people. Like, Brad Thor was a guy I read for years,
yeah,
and he's not like just a writer. He's like a celebrity, right? I mean, you see
yeah,
him on Good Morning America or whatever,
yeah,
and like,
exactly.
and the same with Brad. I've been around him a few times now, and just as vivacious and gregarious as you see him on TV as a human being, that's exactly how he is too. So sometimes again they don't disappoint you.
He's another one, and I think this must be a thing coming out of like the Thriller Fest, that crowd, because a lot of those guys, they're very good about helping out the incoming authors,
Hmm.
And Brad Thor, I interviewed Jack Carr
Hmm.
when Terminal List released,
Hmm.
and he was effusive about Brad Thor and his help, like, he credits Brad at launching his career basically.
Yeah,
So
that's the great mystery of this. I can't speak to all genres because I haven't, I know the thriller world, and more specifically, I know, military kind of spy thriller. That's my world. But that's everybody. We should be in competition, right? We should be jealous of each other. We should
yeah,
have like all this animosity, but nobody does. It's the great mystery of life. All these people, we're all friends. We all get
yeah,
along. We all want the best for each other. I'm on a text chat and with a few of my thriller friends, Don Bentley and some of those guys, and
yeah, yeah,
everybody's like pumping each other up. And like when we have problems, we're on the script. I'm like, hey, I got an issue, man. Can anybody help me with this? And
yeah,
people will be all over like calling you the next minute, going, hey, what you need? What do you need? What do you need?
yeah,
Are you got a problem? Like I had that too. Let's work through it. And so that's the great sort of surprise in my life. I thought people would be sort of standoffish and want to sort of like garner their own little readership, but everybody is quick to help.
yeah, yeah. That's been my experience. I actually wrote something years ago, about there being no actual competition in this
Hmm.
business. Like, because it just because someone picks up, I don't know, Dan Brown's latest book doesn't mean they wouldn't also pick up the latest Kevin Tumlinson book, right?
Yeah. Right.
But that's just not how reading works. It's not like, oh,
Yeah.
I bought Brad Thor, so I'm,
Yeah.
I'm set for books for the rest of my life. So,
Yeah.
no Taylor Moore from me.
No, no, he'll be there for the next generation or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah. What you really want is people inspired to read and excited to read and looking for the next great thing. And so no,
Right.
I'm always ready to explore and hear what somebody else recommends too.
Are you a fast reader?
No,
Me neither, man.
I don't know. I wish I was. I wish I was
Yeah.
faster. I think I would be a lot faster, but I had I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And so for the last like almost 13 years, every time I sit down, it's, can I have some chocolate milk? Can I play this video game? Can I go over to you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
all my reading take
Yeah.
forever because I'm like, where was I? Where was I? And I've gotten to the point now, I've learned I really don't read thick books anymore. I've kind of put those aside and I said there will be a season for that. So everything I have, I mean, physically, I read books with short paragraphs because if I
Yeah.
see some of these books with like a page paragraph kind of thing. I was like, I'll never find my way back to that. But I can
Yeah.
usually remember like where I stopped when a kid interrupts me for something.
Yeah.
But there'll
Has
be a
that
season for that. Yeah.
has that impacted how you write? Do you write short paragraphs?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But there's an interesting side story to that. Um, Gosh, I don't think I've ever told this story before, but it's kind of important. I
Word slinger
read
exclusives. I love those.
Wordslinger. Yeah, yeah. Here's how the sausage is made. Um, that comes uh gosh, now I'm blanking on the name. It was before Porter Goss was CIA, the CIA, George Tenet.
Oh
George
yeah.
Tenet hated, at least I always heard this. We were encouraged when we write to write, they said he hated word blocks, like
Mm.
big blocks of word. So we specifically, when we write, intelligence assessments or whatever, when this was on the analysis side, we would break it up. And I kind of bought into that. I was like, I like that. I like it broken up. I like the eye to be able to like catch different things and have this big block of so as an intel officer, I was kind of trained to do that. And so uh, as an author, I've started to do that too. I kind of keep my paragraphs short.
Yeah.
Sometimes I even break it down. Even more recent in this new book, I'm doing a little bit stylistically, a little bit different. Sometimes I'll have one sentence, um, and then
Yeah.
move on to the next. But I think too, it's a little bit just maybe a sign of the times, not to sort of dumb things down, but I recognize we live in this world with lots of distractions. Our time is limited. We're overwhelmed. So I want books to flow. I want, it's not like the old days where you could just sit around with like War and Peace or whatever. I mean, maybe you can, and ideally you could, but I'm writing genre fiction. I want it to, this is meant to move at a quick clip and it's meant to be fun. It's meant to like,
Yeah.
get your engine running and all that. So I try to write in that way. And I think having that little breakdown helps a little bit
Yeah.
to
We
do
talked
that.
about competition, and I think the reality is like I there is no competition between authors, but I think we are in stiff competition with, social media has changed how people read.
Hmm.
They're reading in a very
Yeah.
short bursts. They want the full
Yeah.
story as quick as possible, usually with pictures.
Yeah.
That's why there are books
I,
that are written as like text message exchanges back and forth.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I write, I jokingly tell people you could read my book on a roller coaster. I specifically try to make it an easy read, a fun read, because that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a moment in time. Now, there's meaningful things to it. I don't want to, act like it's just all fluff and nothing to it, because there's a lot of, people will write to me all the time, say, man, I just was crying by the time I got to this point or whatever. So
yeah,
it's not that there's not heart and soul in the books, but I think when you're writing something like a thriller, it's meant to move quick. It's meant to be
yeah,
fun. It's meant to, and so that's how I do it. So I have short chapters, I have short paragraphs, and I try to keep the book moving. And
yeah,
but again, that's what I write. But back to what you said, I do a little experiment when I get on airplanes, and I'll kind of walk up and down the aisles and just sort of like glance around to see, what are people reading if they're reading anything. And I went on a flight not long ago, and there was not a single person but myself who was holding an actual book.
Yeah.
And most people, I don't even think were reading tablets. I think they were either streaming something or playing video games or scrolling.
Yeah.
And so it's sad, I mean, not that we don't do all of those things, and that's all fine and good, but you hope people, there's still a lot of readers out there. Um, but there's a lot of competition, so you better make it good, I
I
think.
think it's swinging around though. Like I did a presentation at NINC about what I'm calling the artisan age. And part of it was, I walked into a Target and I'm like, what year is this? Because, in the electronics section, they had Polaroid cameras and
Yeah,
vinyl albums and record players and,
yeah,
all this stuff that was like 1994,
yeah.
uh, and I think, and my niece, before she graduated high school, they were doing this thing where they do these, they were read-ins. And it was like, you remember lock-ins where they
Mm,
chaperone
yeah,
you and a bunch of you so they do this, but they're, the chaperones are there, but they're all just there with their books and they're all just reading. And
yeah.
then they'll exchange books. They're not even all reading the same book. So
Love
I
it.
think there's hope.
Love that.
Yeah.
There's something to that. I told this story the other day, and I can't remember if I was in conversation or it was an interview or what, but you mentioned the thing with photograph, having a Polaroid.
Yeah.
Like photos don't mean anything anymore, right? I mean, if you
Right.
got on my phone, there's probably 20,000 of them. I don't even know what they are. I was at a parade yesterday with my daughter, and I took 30, and I probably haven't even looked at them, and I'll probably never look at them again.
Yeah.
And it's sad, pictures used to, like, a photo album meant something, and there's had photo albums or a yearbook, and you'd go back and you'd look at those things over and over. The same with music, CDs, we had CDs, growing up,
Yeah.
and I remember so the story I was telling was that my car got broken into when I was in college, and it was sad that they stole other things, but it was the most sad that they stole my CD collection, not
Yeah.
because of the money, but because they couldn't be replaced. It was the memory that couldn't be replaced, because a lot of them would be little concerts that I'd gone to along the way, and I liked the songs on it, but really that was a photograph of that moment. It was
Yeah.
that CD that I bought, and I could never get it again because it was some band that either didn't exist anymore or they were in traveling across the country and we happened to see them, kind of a thing. And so it is sad that we've lost a lot of that with books. Of course, I see your books back there. You can see mine.
Yeah.
Books are a memory. They're something you can hold and are tangible. And I remember when I bought that book. I remember when I read that book, and it's important.
Yeah. And I mean, I do read a lot of ebooks, especially while traveling. But I've kind of, I don't know, I've come back around to like I'm mostly picking up, the physical books now again. Uh,
Yeah,
Harder to carry a lot of those with you, but I realize too, like, sure, I can carry 20,000 books with me when I get on this plane if I have my e-reader or
yeah.
an app, but I'm not going to read 20,000 books.
No.
At best, I'm going to read one. So yeah, I've started making space in my bag for a paperback or for a hardcover, while I
Well,
travel. So
I'll give you an example. I went to BoucherCon the other day in Nashville, and I was
yeah,
flying back. Was I flying there or flying back? I think I was flying there. But anyhow, again, I do my little sort of look around to see what people are doing. And there's a young girl, like college age, I guess she just gotten out of college, was reading a hardback book. And it was something, I wish I could remember what it was, because it was something like you would never imagine. And I said, listen, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I got to ask you, why are you reading that book? Like, here's this 21-year-old reading this, hardback book. I mean, I can't even remember what it was, but it was something. Oh, it was The Prince of Tides is what it
oh
was.
wow,
And I mean, such
in
a
hardcover.
in hardcover. I said,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but I've got to, like, I got to understand, why are you doing that? And she said, well, my boyfriend's a big reader, and he has these certain books that are like his all-time favorite books, and this was one of them. So I'm kind of reading some of the books that to know more about what he loves. And she and we talked like the entire time, and I found out about her life, my life, and she thought it was fun. So there she is reading. I'm like, well, I'm actually, I think I was going to a thriller writing conference, and so we just started talking books. She's like, oh, well, I want to get, your books for my boyfriend because he's, into this. And we shared books that we love. You see, That was
Yeah.
conversation. That's real
Yeah.
human. Remember when humans used to interact and,
Yeah. Exactly.
talk and get it and find things in common? That's good. Humanity
Yeah.
for humanity, that's a good thing. We need to get back to that. Whether you can or not, I don't know. But like you said, I wish it would go back to a little bit more of that, because it's not just about reading. It's not just about supporting. There's something about that tangible thing of seeing and holding that book, and me seeing that, and finding that interconnectedness to that,
Yeah.
for me, to that story, and for her to have a connection to that story that's important to her beyond just wanting to read it.
Yeah. I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
coming
Yeah,
around though,
yeah,
Taylor. I mean, I really do. I think I'm seeing more of it, but there's a growing unrest now. I just watched a video. This guy's like, he was kind of complaining that he's ditching his Kindle because
okay.
Amazon lost the rights to one of the books that he had, or someone had put a fake or stolen a version and resold it or whatever, and so they just took the book off his Kindle. And
Oh,
he was upset about that, but he started thinking about that in the same terms. He's like, I got 2,000 books on this Kindle. When am I going to read all those again?
yeah,
I might as well just go back. And
yeah,
everyone's sort of missing that tangible, holding something in your hand. Like we don't own
yeah,
anything anymore, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So,
Well,
uh,
even if you don't, I mean, and I shouldn't say this as an author, but I go to the library. I mean, I shouldn't be
no,
buying every book, but I go to the
yeah.
library. I mean, and I connect with the librarians that work there.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's human interaction. It's like, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Like, what do you know about this one? And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just human interaction. I think we need more of that. And
I do not get the animosity towards library. I get it from a
yeah,
sort of, P&L standpoint,
yeah,
but I mean, I'm an author who goes to libraries. I mean, and
yeah,
it's more about the experience with the books and with the people there. And, I used to tell people like when I was working with Draft to Digital, like everybody on staff, we discovered our love for reading at the
mhm,
library first. And
yeah,
then we became people who went out and bought stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the key, man. I don't know why anybody would feel
yeah,
bad about libraries. Well,
yeah.
listen, I've soaked up more of your time than I intended, actually. So
Oh,
we'll
that was a
wrap it
good
up. But
conversation.
it's always
Yeah,
good chatting with you, man.
yeah.
We should definitely do it more often. Feel free to add me that text chain of authors that you said you had.
Yeah, no,
I'm
yeah, no doubt. Be careful what you wish for. You
Oh,
may
I
be
know.
getting.
I know. I'm in some Facebook threads, messenger
Yeah,
threads, and I'm like, oh, why am I'm here. Someone invited me in and I'm here, but like I get pinged like 1,000 times a day from these
I
things.
know. Yeah, no, no, no. It's fun. We'll have to just get together. I need to get down to Austin at some point, and
Yeah.
we just need to get together for lunch or beer or something, and
Yeah,
just
man.
you can meet some of these guys because, no, like I said, it's a wonderful community and tight knit, and everybody's just there to help one another, and I love that. I love that
Yeah.
about this job.
That's one of the best things I've found since entering this business. I mean,
Hmm.
becoming an author and getting into publishing is that there's that growing community. Everybody cares about each other. It's
Yeah,
been great.
yeah,
So, all right, man.
absolutely.
Before we go, I'll tell everybody like your latest book is called Cold Trail, and that's the Garrett Cole series, which is 4 books strong now.
Hmm.
Uh, that one just came out, so people can find that
Yep.
everywhere books are sold. Uh, TaylorMooreBooks.com, that's your website. I'll put that in the
Hmm.
links. What else
Yeah.
would you like to share with people? You said you
Um,
got a new one coming up.
yeah, so I've got a new one coming up. I'm about 75% done with this next one. It's going to be a standalone. It's still going to fall. It's going to be outside of the series. It's going to take place up in the Chesapeake Bay area, a little bit rural Virginia, a little bit on the coastline, Maryland, that area. So it's going to be my old
Yeah.
stomping grounds from the CIA days. But it's gonna continue a little bit. It's gonna be a little shadow government, a little conspiracy stuff going on, but it's gonna get wild.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. A little kind of a dark matter feel for people that are into that, and so it's a little bit. It's gonna be different. My others are kind of straight up thriller, kind of neo western, but this is gonna
Yeah.
be a total different feel. But I think it's fun. I've had fun writing
I'm on board, man. I'm already a fan. Haven't even read your
it.
first book yet.
Okay, good. That's what I like to hear. Pre-order now.
They're coming,
TaylorMooreBooks.com.
and I wouldn't have even returned it. I almost didn't return it because I'm like, well, look, it's just a little tear. But
Yeah.
the whole
No, you want it right.
circumstance. Yeah,
Yeah, you
I
want it
want
right.
a quality book. I want to
Yeah.
display it. When you come
Well,
down, I want to have you sign one, So
well, and I will say the covers of my books, I mean, they're beautiful. I think
yeah,
they're beautiful covers, and I love them, and so I'm proud of them. So yeah, you want
yeah,
to get a good copy there.
they are gorgeous. Yeah. That's I don't know. I have a soft place in my heart for it. It reminds me a little bit of like the Louis L'Amour books,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
my grandfather was a
Yeah.
huge Louis L'Amour, and I've interviewed his children
Wow. Yeah.
over the years, and so I have a soft spot for that vibe.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, man. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate it. Everyone else, thank you for tuning in through the interview, and I'm sure to say something really, like witty and intelligent on the other side of this. I got to do that at least once in my career. So, uh, thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you all on the other side. Taylor, thank you for being a guest, man.
Thanks for having me.
Well, here we are on the other side of the interview, and I'm obligated to say something witty and intelligent. And since I don't script these things, as you can tell, I don't have anything witty and intelligent to say. But I hope you liked that chat with Taylor Moore. Like I said, he's just this genuine and authentic guy. His background is intriguing. I think he and I actually had a conversation on Writers Inc. about the idea. I've had an idea for a long time of taking the song Country Boy Can Survive and writing a book around that as a theme. And he kind of encouraged me to do it. So maybe someday. It's just kind of interesting. Right now, in the Appalachian area, there's been flooding, and there's the hurricane really did a number on the East Coast, and so there's millions without power right now. There's suffering going on there, and there's some of us who are watching this, and we're upset about government response, and we're upset about the fact that money went to foreign entities, to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, but a few million was set aside to assist FEMA with situations like this, and now they're worried that there won't be enough for the next. It's just guaranteed disaster. I'm not going to try to make this political, but I'm very upset by that. But something that's been really interesting is these. I'm watching, Twitter and other places, YouTube, and there are these groups of people, these country boys, these hillbillies and rednecks, who are going out and just filling in where the government dropped the ball. I watched a story today. They called them rednecks. I mean, to some that's a derogatory term. To my people, the people I grew up with, that's just who we were. Not me so much. I mean, I grew up in that culture, but never quite fit in entirely with that culture. But I've got some experiences. But these I do know something that I hope I share with my people and these Appalachian people is this drive to help others when you can. Help the people in need when you're able to help them. And watched a story about these guys who came in they have like their own backhoes and tractors and stuff, and they cleared the roads where the government was failing to do so. They opened up paths for people to be able to get out of these areas where they were trapped. Watched another story about people who have privately owned helicopters who are going in and rescuing people or bringing them food and water or letting authorities know where they are. It's not cheap to do that sort of thing. Fuel costs are pretty high anyway, and just getting in a helicopter, even a small helicopter, there's risk, but there's also the cost of it, and there's the time, and but they're bringing hope to these people. That's the sort of thing that I see, especially here in Texas. I've seen a lot of that. You do got your rough edges, right? The Panhandle can be a little rough. I've been there. I've spent some time there. There's some rugged lifestyle that can happen there. Same is true for a lot of other places, Montana and parts of Oklahoma and places like that. I've been to a lot of these places where there's a sort of roughness to the character of both the landscape and the people, but there's also this sort of undercurrent of we're going to take care of our own. And Appalachia has this that region has sort of a reputation, the whole hillbilly thing. It can even be a little frightening when you're there. I've been there, and there's been experiences I've had in those regions that can be a little alarming. There is a sort of hesitance to accept outsiders, for example. And I get that. I get where that comes from. I've experienced that my whole life. I know what the fear of the alien is when it comes to close-knit groups like that. But I'm always heartened to see these people like pull together, especially during hard times and disasters. My wife and I lived in the Houston area for most of our marriage. I grew up about 70 miles south of there, so the Gulf Coast region and the Houston region were always home for me and my bunch. But in Houston, a few years back, like we had Hurricane Harvey came in. Was not a powerful hurricane. I think it was like a Category 2 at most. But it just sat on top of the city and dumped rain for days. And we were actually flooded in. We were renting an apartment. We had come off the road. We had been living full time in an RV for a few years, a couple of years. But we had come off the road. We had an apartment in Pearland, Texas, and we were stranded in the apartment. Like floodwaters had surrounded the entire place. We couldn't leave. The grocery store that was only across the street ran out of groceries. I remember making my way over there and going in and finding we needed eggs. And so I went to the segment that has the eggs, and the only thing left were scraps. There were cartons with like broken eggs in them or whatever. And I remember finding a carton and picking through all the eggs that I could find in that section, finding any of them that were just usable. So one or two that weren't cracked in any way. The rest were maybe cracked or chipped or, had a hole in the shell or whatever. But I managed to cobble together a dozen eggs for me and Kara, which came in real handy. So because that was that grocery store ran out of food, basically. And we had our stores, but there were things we needed. But in that area, when that happened, I saw people just pulling together. I mean, I saw people coming in from my stomping grounds, like down toward the coast, driving in Houston, bringing their bass boats and their aluminum bottom boats and going into these neighborhoods that were flooded and rescuing people and pets from their homes and bringing water. I saw swamp buggies come in. People came in with trailers and things. They'd bring their campers and their RVs and stuff for people to have a place to sleep and stay because there weren't enough FEMA trailers. This is the kind of thing that makes me proud to be human. I mean, I grew up in a southern state. I guess Texas never gets considered as southern, but I don't understand that because we are further south than most other states. But I grew up in a state that kind of gets a bad rap a lot of the times, and yet there's nowhere else I'd rather be if I'm going to have to face that kind of struggle and danger because we pull together. So, and I think that's really true of just about anywhere in the country. But it just sort of seems to be much more apparent in these regions where everybody's considered to be rednecks or hillbillies or backwards in some way. Those backwards people, man, they know how to take care of their own, and they're not ashamed or afraid to go reach a hand out and help a stranger in need either. So, what does that have to do with this interview with Taylor Moore? I mean, he and I have had, in a separate interview, we had a little bit of discussion about this, but he just kind of strikes me as one of those souls, and so I don't think he'll mind me kind of taken this time to talk about that as a concept. But anyway, if you liked this chat, let me know. Say something in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe, of course. That's obligated by international law to say that if I'm on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast platform, thank you. I would also appreciate it if you'd hop over to YouTube, youtube.com/Wordslinger podcast, where you can actually subscribe, see my mug, see the face of my guests. But that one's a little easier for me to track, see how things going. I had someone let me know that, they subscribe to YouTube, but they prefer listening to the podcast on a podcast app because they kind of take it with them on the go. I get that. So that's perfectly fine. Just helps me out if you're also subscribing on YouTube. It's easier for me to see how I'm doing, frankly. But beyond all that, make sure you go check out Taylor's books. I'll put a link to his website in the show notes, especially since I can't remember it off the top of my head. I think it's like Taylor Moore Books or something like that. But don't take my word for that. Go look in the show notes. There'll be a link to his author page. I just got a couple of his books I've been waiting on. I had to send some back, as you heard, because they were, send the first one back because it was torn. So I'm waiting to get that one back. But I'm looking forward to reading his stuff. As often happens with these interviews, I don't always get to read the books before I talk to the authors. So I try, but sometimes the pace moves too fast, and I've got other books I need to read, and so it happens. But I'll dig everything I know about Taylor, so I know I'm going to love his books, and it's kind of in a genre I like, so I'm looking forward to it. So if you do that, make sure you leave him reviews, and you can even say you heard about him on the Wordslinger podcast. There you go. Other than that, I appreciate you sticking around. Thank you for your support. Hope you're having a wonderful day. If you happen to be in these affected regions from Hurricane Helene, is it Helene, Helena? I don't know, but it's I'm praying for you. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're safe. And if you are able to lend a hand, of course, I pray for you too, because you're a good soul. So thank you for all that. And, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.
Wordslinger.